Hardly a soul knew of their existence.
You can find out whose morale's low and get rid of some of them.
Americans weren't supposed to hear these words until the year 2023. President Lyndon Johnson's secret White House audio tapes, a vivid and revealing glimpse into LBJ and daily life in the Oval Office.
I wish to God there was something that I could do.
I know you love Jack and he loves you.
You thought you knew him, but these recently discovered recordings may turn your view of LBJ upside down.
Well, it looks like me we're getting into another Korea. It just worries the hell out of me.
Historians have been ambivalent about the legacy of President Lyndon Baines Johnson. After tragedy elevated him to the Oval Office in November 1963, his 5 years there were celebrated for giant strides in civil rights, but marred by his disastrous policy in Vietnam. Johnson has been seen as an enigma for a generation, until events in 1992 offered a new view into his complex character. A catalog of candid moments, all recorded on audio tape.
When I found out that President Johnson had recorded telephone conversations, I was frankly surprised. And I think a lot of people who worked for him had the same reaction.
Taping began shortly after 3 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963. Just half an hour after he was sworn in as president aboard Air Force One, the tapes rolled as the Boeing 707 raced back toward Washington.
AF-1, AF-1, please stand by. We have Mrs. Rose Kennedy.
Yes, Mr. President.
I wish to God there was something that I could do, and I wanted to tell you that we were grieving with you.
Thank you very much. I know you love Jack and he loves you.
That conversation and a few others were recorded outside the White House by the Signal Corps, which routed all presidential communications. Once inside the White House, Johnson maintained a more elaborate setup.
Each of his secretaries had dictaphone machines that were physically located in the wheel wells of their desks right next to the Oval Office. The president typically would flip a switch on his button on his desk. The secretary would peek in, and he would signal her to begin recording by moving his finger like this.
Why was he making the secret recordings? Johnson left no clear answer. But whatever his reasons, the recordings were often on his mind. LBJ regularly ordered that they be transcribed the same day so he could read them in bed. But LBJ's recordings may not have made for very soothing bedtime reading. Many of them captured agonizing decision-making. In particular, LBJ's very personal concerns about the expanding war in Vietnam.
I'll tell you, the more I just stayed awake last night thinking about this thing, the more I think of it. It looks like me we're getting into another Korea. It just worries the hell out of me. I don't think it's worth fighting for, and I don't think we can get out. And it's just the biggest damn mess I ever saw. It's an awful mess.
The recordings are also a vivid reminder of the force of Johnson's personality. Shortly after taking office, LBJ heard that some Secret Service agents who had served under Kennedy wanted transfers because they viewed Johnson as too bossy. Johnson, infuriated, called Secret Service agent Rufus Youngblood.
You all call a meeting of your group, and whatever you decide you want to do, if you want to resign, I'll be glad to accept it forthwith. Cut that down a minute. You can find out whose morale's low and get rid of some of them. And I'll get Hoover to send me a couple of 21-year-old accountants over here and probably do as good a job.
No, we'll stay with you, sir.
Okay.
The recordings also put a few bold touches on the demure and retiring image favored by Lady Bird Johnson.
She was his most trusted and valued assistant. She was the one he relied on most, even for such things as critiquing his performance at a news conference.
You want to listen for about 1 minute to my critique, or would you rather wait till
Yes,
tonight?
ma'am. I'm willing now.
During the statement, you were a little breathless, and there was too much looking down, and I think it was a little too fast. In general, I'd say it was a good B+.
It was not unusual for Johnson's secretaries to forget to turn the recorder off. That's why Johnson's archive contains many entertaining human exchanges. Moments as earthy and mundane as the president haggling for free haircuts from a fancy New York hairstylist.
Can I talk to you now without getting in the paper and getting it advertised?
I give you my solemn word as a gentleman.
I'm a poor man. I don't make much money, but I got a wife and a couple of daughters and 4 or 5 people that run around with me, and I like the way you make them look. This is your country, and I want to see what you want to do about it.
When do you want me to come?
Well, it depends first on how much it'll cost me.
But this vast archive was a record that most of us were never meant to hear. Johnson was anxious about the recordings leaking out, so he made his assistant, Mildred Stiegel, their custodian.
He had left these with her with instructions that if they were still in her care after he died, she should turn them over to me and give me instructions that they be kept closed for a period of 50 years.
And so, in 1973, the recordings were handed over to the Johnson Presidential Library in Austin, Texas. It was agreed that the recordings would go public in the year 2023, but it didn't work out that way. 2 factors pushed up the deadline by 31 years.
The Johnson Library, they were very concerned about the physical deterioration of the tapes, and were very worried that at the end of 50 years that they would not have a means to be able to play back the recordings.
Then, in 1991, came Oliver Stone's controversial film JFK, with its insinuation that Johnson was involved in a conspiracy to murder Kennedy in Dallas.
It was the Senate's reaction to the film JFK that prompted the Senate to mandate that all materials in all of the archival depositories in the government having anything at all to do with the Kennedy assassination be opened, so that once and for all the questions that were flying around about that assassination be answered if they could be.
At first, the sheer volume of recordings was shocking, especially since, after the Watergate years, White House taping had become synonymous with presidential impropriety. But some also began to see that the recordings were a window into the mind and heart of a perplexing and challenging leader from America's most turbulent decade. The Lyndon Johnson tapes can be listened to at the Lyndon Baines Johnson Library and Museum in Austin, Texas.